omnipresent. The chosen movies fall in line with Periyar's ideas. For instance, the villain in Kaala, Haridada, is a Brahmin, is a Hindu, is an Aryan, and is also representative of the Indian state. So, Hinduism. The self respect movement identified three main Hindu religious texts that aid in advancing the Sanatana Dharma: the Manusmriti, Ramayana, and the Bhagavad Gita. The self respect movement challenged them and even went to the extent of burning these texts to show their opposition. The Ramayana was reinterpreted by Periyar as a text imposing Aryan authority over inferiorized Dravidian identity. Ram is held as a feudal, patriarchal, hierarchical Aryan figure, and Ravanan is identified as the true Dravidian leader who dared to raise up to Ram and his caste values. Periyar offers a subverted reading of the Ramayana, and the same can be seen in Kaala. Kaala is overtly referred to as Ravanan multiple times by the villain, by his son, and himself. And his friend is called Vali. We see Pulavar Kurandai's Ravana Kavyam on his table, a Dravidian text that celebrates Ravana as the hero. Kala's death is depicted as the death of Ravana and the victory of Ram. The movie parallels the villain Haridev Dada with Lord Ram. Haridada calls himself superior, who is born to rule. And through this, the movie questions the whole idea of a just, fair, and righteous Ram Rajya and depicts it as a governance where the lives of lower caste people and women are under constant threat. The omnipresent Brahminical hegemony is also symbolized by the big brother kind of presence of Haridada, who in banners and posters appears all over the city. The other villains in the movie are called Vishnu and Perumal Swami, after various avatars of Lord Ram. It is Valmiki's text that is used as justification to kill Kala. Haridada says Ram has to kill Ravana because that is what Valmiki himself has written. The Ramayana is seen as a text that upholds Manu's caste dharma. The builders who want to demolish Dharavi and rebuild it as Dandakaranya Nagar are called Manu builders symbolically. And Manu's authority and its caste codes are challenged when Kala promises that he would never allow Manu builders inside Dharavi. Karnan takes on the Mahabharata. The tragic mythological Karnan, who got separated from his mother and brothers, who lost his rightful uh, privileged place in the caste hierarchy, and was shunned to a life among the lower castes. He who was denied a chance to compete in Draupadi Swayamvar and to whom Krishna apologizes later is not the Karnan that is featured in the movie. The very first line of his introduction makes this clear. Suryanum Pekkavilla, which means not birthed or fathered by the sun. What locates this Karnan is caste and his caste alone. The movie marks its break from the epic and a rejection of its values when it shows Karnan chopping the fish into two with his word and emerging successful, very different from the canon where he's not even let to participate in the competition of hitting the fishes high because of his caste. Duryodhana, who falls on the evil side in the epic, is depicted as a respectful leader of the village who values, cherishes, and encourages dissent. Lord Krishna, who is celebrated as the greatest upholder of Dharma in the epic, is cast as a casteist police officer in the film who strives to protect the caste structure. And it's Kannapiran who unleashes brutal force on the village of Podiyankulam. The Hindu epics that legitimize caste codes and caste conduct are revisioned and read from a subaltern point of view, questioning Brahminical hegemony. In Kala and Karnan, we see alternative religions that aren't founded on Brahmanism being presented. Statues of Buddha can be spotted widely in Dharavi as Buddhism, being an atheistic religion, is free of the concept of caste. The people of Podiyankulam do follow Hinduism, but an alternative Hinduism, not the institutionalized mainstream Brahminical Hinduism that operates on the basis of exclusion and purity. Debrahminical Sirudeva Varipadu, where small village deities are worshipped as protectors, which is often considered fringe by the Hinduism of Trinity gods, is what is found in the movie. And it is shown to not costing people their self respect or human dignity. Patriarchy, as the Brahminical patriarchy places the Brahmin man at the top of the hierarchy, Periyar found it necessary for his self respect movement to fight for the freedom of women alongside the anti-caste struggle. Periyar encouraged women to occupy the public domains, defy gender norms and responsibilities, and even his honorific Periyar, which means a revered one, was given to him by women at a Tamil Nadu conference held in 1938. This was one unusual instance where women held the power to determine how a man must be viewed by the world. Though Kaala and Karnan are primarily male narratives that honor male valor, the women characters are not portrayed as subservient, passive women lacking agency, even in their limited scope. Kala's wife Selvi, his son Lenin's lover Puyal, Zarina, and even Kannan's sister and his lover are very different from the women that we see in Maniratnam's Nayagan and Talabadi. They are not damsels in distress waiting to be rescued by a chivalrous male, or women who choose family's honor over their own desires. In Nayakan, Velu Nayakar gives respectability to an underage sex worker by marrying her, even when there's no indication that her consent was sought. The paternalistic gestures of wiping away her tears and placing his hand on her head to show his acceptance of her, and her falling at the feet of him in gratitude for marrying her, inferiorize her further and subjugate her to a great extent. The ideal way of helping her would have been to offer to help her lead an independent life free of exploitation. But no, it's the Brahminical idea of a woman's respectability that the movie follows, as where a woman's honor is restored only through a proper marriage. In Talapati, Surya's Rajni's Carnatic song singing lover, in order to protect her Brahmin father's honor, leaves Surya and marries a person, a privileged upper caste man of her father's choice. She obediently abides by the family rules and is nowhere seen to behave in a way that is not expected of a woman. Another character, Padma, a widow, is married off to her husband's murderer, who is believed to be the ideal protector for her and her daughter. So these characters do not are not let to exercise any agency, and they comply with the decisions taken for them by men without exhibiting any degree of resistance. The women in Kaala are refreshing as they are vocal, active, and do not conform to the society's expectations. Zarina is a single mother, and the movie doesn't feel the necessity to discuss further the nature and reason for her singledom. Her being a single mother ex Haridada, but she's secure enough to not even notice it. Kala's to be daughter in law Puyal is a political feminist and she's courageous. Puyal and Zarina occupy the public domain and are not confined to the domestic settings. And the movie doesn't disapprove of them or shame them. Puyal even rewrites an incident of potential victimhood into a moment of empowerment. When the police officers attempt to humiliate her modesty, she chooses to pick up a rod to fight back instead of her clothes that could protect her honor. So her body is free from the Brahminical idea of shame. And true to her name, Puyal, which means storm, Puyal becomes a force of nature to reckon with. Both in Kaala and Karnan, we see women courageously participating in public meetings and voicing out their opinions, contrary to the women that we see in Haridada's Brahminical household, where their only duty is to serve food. Coming to the state, along with Hinduism and Aryanism, is seen as a
Uh,
domain of Brahminical hegemony by Periyar. He was
okay, you have
suspicious
to
of the
conclude.
Indian.
Yeah, you have to
Oh,
conclude
okay.
now.
Okay, sorry. The state we see two the movie covers both the legislature and the executive, but judiciary still remains unreachable to these privileged masses. So Haridev Abhyankar is a right-wing politician who represents the state, and Kanapiran is the police officer. So both of these people use the state to repress the people of Dharavi and Kodiyankulam. The movie also shows how uh, the powerful use the system and its rules and regulations to marginalize the oppressed further. The rules do not protect the marginalized as they were intended to be. So, Karnan and Kala, both anti caste narratives, do not attribute the evil of the caste system to one person or community. So, instead of subjective violence, they It places the onus on the various institutions and systems at play. So the movies also celebrate the working class, biryani, meat, toddy, hip hop, village deities, black pigs, righteous anger and violence, man woman romances that do not end up in marriages, calling elders by their names, and families that function on love and not pretentious respect. The movies celebrate all these. So, all these things that do not usually find a place in Brahminical narratives. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, RD. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Um, Thank you for your presentation, and you were quite on time. Thank you for that, especially. And yes, it was a very good presentation. So now, just to clarify, we would take the questions after all the presentations are done. So we would take all the questions together. To our listeners, I would suggest that you can write it down in our chat box. People who are watching it on YouTube, you can paste it there in the comment section, and then we would try to answer as many as we can um, after it's done. So yeah, moving on to the next participant, the next paper. This is by Mr. R. Sanjay Pandy. Yeah, am I pronouncing it correctly?
So, Sanjay Pandy.
Yeah. So Sanjay Pandy is he's doing his the part of the MA English and Cultural Studies program at Christ University, Bangalore. Is doing a film and media studies course for the ongoing project work in his final year. This to ESD to create a full-fledged semiotic or visual analysis of the auteurs of the post-2000s era of Dalit Bahujan filmmaking in Tamil cinema, about the assertive qualities and aesthetical aspects in the film as a subjective medium to convey and propagate for making the conversations in a political public sphere. His interests predominantly deal with visual culture and connotative science, as in photography, films, and storytelling on the screen, which could converge beyond media and groups during the contemporary era and beyond then to analyze them critically. Very good. So you can start. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Can you hear me?
And you would be given 20 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, sir. So, good evening, everyone. My topic is narrativizing subjective aesthetics and caste identity politics, especially in Paranjit's recent film, Sarpatta Parambarai, which came in 2021, and Madras came into 2014. So, I am doing a semiotic analysis on both the films, and to look into my predominant topic, we could see how dominant narratives that has been done before, and how it is being subverted. I mean, how it's been asserted now with the presumptive assertion, and also how socio-political aesthetics and how the subjective authentic narration of a author deals with, I mean, mainly deal with the particular films as we portrayed in this particular study. So in this paper, I'm looking into mainly about identity politics and also how subjective resistance and also how the visual text as in the entire film medium being transformed uh, from the from the point of view of conceptually viewing it as just a film, and also how it is being asserted later in this context of semiological view. So I'm looking into these films mainly through the aesthetical quotient, and also how we can see those particular aspects in each particular frames, and also in each particular settings or set designs or anything that has to do with aesthetic quotient, and also how the audio predominantly done by his I mean by their narrative and by their subjective system here. So moving on to the primary sources that I've used, and the term audio that I'm using here is only predominant to uh, mention the director, and also how, as an individual, how subjective resistance in their craft, in their art, has been transformed, has been represented in each film. So later we to look into the assertion point of view. I am substantiating the entire assertion of presumptive assertion, which is done by Noel Carroll, and who is the film critic, and the author did talk about fiction, non-fiction, and the films like in general how subjective quotient of a film and how proportion makes a film and their medium, and with each particular images of painting, anything that has to do with the film medium has been transformed into media. So in the semiological way, I'm looking into cultural critic Roland Barthes' elements of semiology and also the main aspect of signifier, and science in the frame, science in each particular frames. So the cultural critic Mrs. Pandian, who mainly talks about the modernity and also uh, who mainly talks about caste identity and the politics of public sphere after the 1990s, especially the Mandal Commission. I mean, Mandal Commission also later the revival of Dalit assertion in Tamil Nadu, and his particular paper has been the primary source to substantiate more on the arguments that I'm going to. So the scholar in like all cultural studies, I mean, this, Madhav Prasad is a scholar of cultural studies who mainly talks about Senate politics in South India and how his political significance in terms of identifying his point of view in representing the aesthetics of South Indian cinema, how politics is literally delved into the film medium. So moving on to the analysis, I'm mainly looking into the cultural identity and the inclusion of politics in the recent Dalit Bahujan wave cinema after 2010. So the inclusion of the Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's image in the background, with the montages showcasing like opportunities and how it is really important in terms of like showcasing the proportion content of making the protagonist more in line with the quotient of his identity and his collective community's involvement in the boxing match in the film has been portrayed here. Also, the use of blue color aesthetic and blue color paint, maybe with the towel, maybe with their attire, and even even the usage of color in particular titles could be seen in this film. So the political connotation of just the picture, I mean, like giving the picture could be a denotative symbol. I mean, denotative symbol of gesture that one could give. But in this particular film, you could see the montages take place in the main frame of narrative, and how the author uses the personal style and also the interior meaning of giving a particular gift. In terms of here, we could see the inclusion of images of Buddha and Ambedkar. So the academician Jyoti Nishad mainly talks about Bahujan spectatorship. And in this particular quotient, we could see in this frame itself how the newfound symbiotic relationship between giving the image and also portraying the mainstream narrative is important here. So later, in this frame, you could see a J beam in the background, which is written in Tamil, and also the usage of blue color in general, and how it is really significant in portraying everything that has to do with the frame, and also how it is also parasitic in the nature of connotating the meaning of signified quotient of the community as a collective representation here, and also the usage of significant historical shift, as in how the display of these words and also how the display of each particular aspect in a conceptual way is being portrayed here. So the next particular frame we could look into here is the usage of beef in the frame. So you could see the beef and any kind of meat that has to do uh, the, with the working population. We could see how it is not really portrayed in their own culture in terms of in a mainstream way. As Kancha Elias stated about in this particular passage, we could see the opportunity to even like say it is being shunned by others. So the proportional content of the author to showcase the beef as a staple food and even to include it as a favorite staple dish in the household, it is shown on the frame. So later, moving on to the next point of identity politics and also mainly about subjective resistance, we could see Periyar even Ramaswamy's picture being given to the couple, and also it also includes Karnan and also he who was I mean, they were the frontiers of Dravidian movement after Anna, and everything has to do with after 1920s and 40s in terms of making the Dravidian political parties more significant in the in TN in Tamil Nadu, but you could see there's a spiritual material divide between cultures and also how it is stay stable? I mean, how it has really changed after the quotient of 60s, 70s, when politics also delved into it. So to reclaim a position in this colonial public sphere, and we can look into the language of caste and also how it is being transformed after the 1990s, and how the inclusion of politics and the cultural identity in securing their space on screen could be the most significant factor here. So the next point of view here is symbolic wall and subjective resistance. The next one, Madras mainly deals with the wall and also how the importance of hierarchy of power in representing the wall, and also how the wall symbolizes political power, caste, religion, and everything that has to do with the open-ended narration of the symbolism that has to do with the wall. So, questioning the Tamil politics in general in terms of Hindu nationalism, and also how the caste based their political parties, and how the Dravidian politics itself like, transformed later part of the later part of the independence. And here in the 2010s and also after 90s, the significant portion of dominant caste playing a major electoral politics role in day-to-day elections, and also in maintaining the parliament itself. How subjugation has to do with marginalized communities has been portrayed here. So the connotation signifiers here, as an entire general way, you could see the wall as a connotator. So the signs and I mean, sign of the wall and the sign of the wall, and also signify a quotient of political power and to reclaim the position with two political parties. Entirely here in Tamil Nadu, like two major political parties has to do with Dravidian politics. So here, their entire notion of capturing the particular space within the urban labor population area of quote unquote North Chennai could be seen as a subjective way. So, as mentioned by Kancha Elayatu, only a civil war can break down the wall. So, any kind of barrier that has to do with bringing the equality to has to do with the spiritual material divide. So, that particular spiritual material divide here is majorly noted as the open-ended narrative of the wall being the hierarchical power of politics, religion, and caste. So when religion is looked into in general way, and also here in the context of wall, it is I mean it is being shunned out. I mean it's being shunned by the others, and also like in the film itself, it's being looked into a superficial way. So the term of representation, I mean the term of representation in terms of looking into politics and aesthetic quotient here itself to represent the environment means to be more subjective in the way. So in that subjective question, the author mainly uses this particular wall and also to showcase how the wall is being the major part of the film, and also how it is connotated to signify how other parties are also wanted to include. I mean, wanted to show the hierarchy of power. So thus the single wall became the connotator or the single signifier aspect here. So after defacing the painting and the urban area itself, I mean, represents the main notion of education posters, and also it mainly signifies how education, also rational thinking, is more important in the later part of it. So the perceptive assumption film mainly deals with interpersonal narration, and also how the proof of making the film more in line with proportion to the author's vision, and also how it is narrated in a way it is assertive in terms of not only the frame and not only the code, not only the frame and not only the just the narration. Entirely entire the medium, it is mainly portrayed as the interpersonal canons, and also how it is really significant to carry the film in a certain way. So later part of the film, you could see and semiology as an entire way, the inclusion of data Bira because image in the background, also I mean how the widespread I mean how semiology in terms of apportion the entire system, because in terms of semiology you could see the first system of science being represented in one way, and later in this part we could see caste as the first system of science, but later now in the post 2010s and Dalit Bahjan wave cinema, semiology in terms of looking into entire films and even the frames, and even showcasing each particular aspect as a socio-political signifier here in wall, here as a wall, and later in showcasing each daily activities and everyday aesthetics in a subjective way has been done by the audios. So here in the last frame, we could see the audio emphasizes on the importance of social consciousness and rationality, and through attaining education opportunities in the later part of the film. So the inclusion of Dr. B. Ambedkar's image could also be noted here in the back. So that's about the entire research paper, and also it is the major question of everyday aesthetics, and also even to use the science, and even to make sure the caste identity politics in a semiological way uh, was being used by the authors. So in this particular question, we could see how the popular narrative cinema has been predominantly done before, and but here in terms of just focusing on the subjective resistance, it is majorly located into the cinematic gazes of the Dalit Bahujan wave cinema. It has been done after the 2010s. So thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you. Um, so again, one more paper that was done within the frame of time, the given time limit. So we will move on to the next paper, which is Alisha Chandra. Alisha Chandra is a chair and is currently conducting her doctoral research under the title Marginalized Female Consciousness in Dalit Writing. Her areas of interest are subaltern literature and the literature of the marginalized. Moreover, she is also eager to work on post-colonial texts and feminine narratives, especially the ones dealing with the issues of women, subjugated and exploited women. Additionally, she's also looking forward to working on contemporary pieces of fictional writings, um, works on D.K. Rao and Anna Brown. Alisha also enjoys writing fiction and has co-authored three anthologies, namely Green Sapphire, Immature Feelings, and Autumn Breeze. She has worked with multiple publishing houses and is keen on publishing more works in the near future. Um, so, yeah, over to you, Alisha.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for the brilliant introduction. And okay, so I'm here. I'll discuss the movies. The basic, my topic is reception of movies based on Dalit issues. So, as in the recent times, there have been cases in which, like the Indian cinema and the mainstream Indian cinema is presenting topics that are not very cliche. Like earlier Indian cinema used to basically produce either rom-coms, uh, and they were the ones that were basically hit, that really worked well on the box office for rom-coms, romantic comedies, as well as action thrillers. But with time, people are being more sensitized, and there are movies like Article 15 and movies like Shumanga Savdhan franchise are gaining potential, and there are people are coming and looking into the in the movies. Okay, is my screen visible to all?
Yeah, the paper is visible.
Okay, great, thank you. So that's what I was talking about. So now the fact being that uh, the movies that I have considered are the mainstream Indian movies that did well on the box office. Apart from that, they were also based on Dalit issues, and Dalit issues that were extremely grave. I would like to introduce the movies first. The two movies that I've worked on in this paper are Article 15, the one that released in 2019 with Ayushmann Khurrana in the lead and directed by Anubhav Sinha. And the second movie that I have considered is Akrosh. Uh, it was released in the year 2010 and was directed by Priyadarshan. All right. So the basic thing that I want to discuss is because I'm not sure if everyone has seen the movie or not. So I wanted to discuss the basic storyline. So what happens is, in talking about Article 15 in particular, there is an IPS officer who's posted in Lalgaon, obviously a fictional town, and his education basically was done in uh, Europe, most of it, and then he's here, and he is a complete outsider. He comes from an urban background, and he's lived most of his life outside India, so he doesn't know about the real life situations. As his girlfriend also says, "Welcome to Page 7 India." So he's a newbie, and he's encountered with the caste system, with the brutal caste system in Lalgaon itself. Okay, so talking about the issues that the movie addresses, and how the movie is basically a crime thriller, but the movie it talks about real life situations in the rural background, and it kind of tries to demystify the and try to break the myth associated with the rural village life, the happy rural village life. So talking about Article 15 and the various issues it addresses, I'll basically address the dialogues and the various hard hitting realities. And so the basic thing that Article 15 touches upon is that talking about the basic storyline is when Ayan Ranjan arrives at Lalgaon, he sees that there's some confusion regarding a case where three girls have been missing. Now, the girls are Dalit, of course, and there's no FIR that is being registered against the case. He, being an upright police officer with his first posting, of course, so he urges and he pushes the things through himself, and the FIR is registered. Just the next day, we find those girls hanging from a mango tree, and the three girls who went missing, out of the two, or out of them only the dead bodies of only two girls have been found. The one girl stays missing. Now what happens in this particular movie is that he slowly comes uh, in terms of the fact that there is not this is not just a crime for the sake of it, or it's not just a simple murder. There are many attributes to it, and there are many uh, parts of it. So talking about it, how he when uh, Ayushman Khurana, the character IPS Ayan Ranjan, enters the village, he's faced with the caste system, of course. And the first instance that he sees is that when he's entering the village, his own staff warns him against uh, avoiding some people. For example, when he enters the village, he he recommends that they should buy some water from a particular place. But the thing that strikes him the most, and which is completely new for him, is that he's told that this is a shop owned by a Dalit, and they live out in the outskirts of the place, and their shadow is to be avoided. No, forget about touching things that are being sold by those Dalits. Of course, their shadow, the shadow of the Dalits too, is to be avoided. That is the first instance of untouchability, and that's also the first instance of caste system that Ayan witnesses himself. In the next scene, what we basically see, and the entire procedure and the entire premise of untouchability lingers for in the entire movie. Also, we see at a point that there are three boys who are tied to an SUV car, the sports utility vehicle, a very heavy vehicle, and they have been flogged, they have been beaten brutally. So after much inquiry, it is found out that what was their crime, why were they being beaten, and in full public display. So again, another encounter, another important idea that comes forward is that they were trying to enter a temple, and that they were Dalits, so it's not something that is permissible. Now the movie uh, is tries to bring to light the fact that how deep rooted is the caste system, and specifically in the northern part of India. The fact being that there's this character of Nishad, who happens to have popular Dalit support. He's not a politician, but is someone who has helped the Dalits of the village, and he himself hails from Lalgaon. He talks about, and this is a place where he comes to the forefront, played by Muhammad Zishan Ayub. He comes and he meets the character of Ayan, and there's this little conversation that they have, and he talks about the fact that what kind of caste system is being practiced and how ruthless it is. So he tells that there's his beloved Gora, who was also appointed as the midday meal cook in a school. So the caste system is being brutally followed by the school as well, by school students who are obviously, when you're talking about school students, something that comes to your mind is children of 8 to 12 years old, or even younger, 5 to 6, 15, 16 years old, the bigger range. So she was the one who was appointed. She was a Dalit, of course, and she was appointed for cooking the meals for the school students. But the school students refused to eat food prepared by her, as she was a Dalit, which ultimately led to the food of 150 people being thrown away. So these are the various hard-hitting instances of untouchability that Article 15 shows. And the next comes the idea of division of labors and laborers. The fact that the Ayan was very diligently trying to solve the case of the missing girl and also the murder case. The fact being that to solve the particular case, he wanted to go through a particular pond that was very dirty and it was said to be inhabited by pigs. Now, what happens ultimately is that because all sanitation workers are on a strike, the sanitation workers definitely being Dalits, all of them are on strike, so he needs people who would help him cross the pool, yeah, to be go across the lake and find leads, and that would help them locate the girl who was missing. Now what happens is, none of the police constables, even because even when they're on duty, they are not ready to jump into the lake and help find leads, because they all come from upper caste, and the lake that was namely called the Suartal, which was obviously inhabited by pigs, was to be dealt only by Dalits. At that one particular instance comes, uh, he summons police officers and constables from various other police stations as well. But then only one man comes forward who says that, yes, tell me what can I do for you, because I am a Yadav and I can go and I can step in this lake, and then maybe I could help, because he's comparatively of a lower caste as compared to the other people. Another important fact which no one can escape in today's world is identification by caste. How each and every person is identified by his caste, and his caste precedes him. Talking about Ayan Ranjan, he is someone who is not even remotely uh, aware of the castes of his own caste, so he just steps into the village. But then the fact being that his staff has already tried to know his caste as well as his subcaste by his surname. Each and every person who comes as who tries to introduce himself to Ayan specifies his caste very clearly. A big example being the character of Manoj Pahwa, uh, introducing himself as myself, Circle Officer Brahmdat. In fact, Brahmdat Singh sir. The emphasis on the surname Singh is unmistakable. Apart from that, there comes an instance when Ayan is kind of briefed with the caste system, and he tries to ask all his staff that what is the caste of every individual. It's only then that Ayan learns that his staff has also scrutinized his caste, and they know about his caste, etc. So he also talks about, he asks what's the caste, and there's a very it's funny as well as ironical, because a constable who is from Dalit background, he clearly specifies his subcaste, that he's a chamar, and he also specifies that the boys who were being flogged for entering the temple were Parsi. Now both of them are Dalits, but then he specifies and takes pride in the fact that he's a chamar who is above uh, the subcaste Parsi, and that he won't touch the food prepared by Parsis, and he won't even deal with it. These are slight instances which are really true, and which ring true with the experiences of each and every Dalit, uh, living in the northern part of India, and in that is representative of the village that is being shown in the movie. Okay. Also, in the movie we can see how Dalits are expected to live a low and subjugated to lead a low and subjugated kind of an existence. That being said, the with time, we when the case is unfolding slowly, we learn that why were the girls raped. the girls who were raped and hung on the mango tree, because obviously there's a lot of speculation about the fact whether or not they were raped, because there were a number of post-mortem reports, etc., but not going into the details of that as of now. So as the rape accused is found, so it is he's confronted, and in the investigation he confesses the fact that he was why did you kill her. So the reason was that the three girls were asking for a hike in their uh, daily wages. The hike was of rupees 3, and because he felt that the girls didn't deserve rupees 3, or that if he gave rupees 3 and increased the daily wage of the girls, it would ultimately uh, re- it would ultimately result in everyone asking for a wage increase. So he simply slaps the girls, and the girls which their working workplace. The Obviously spoilers alert, but ultimately they were raped because they were not willing to be confined to their lowly existence. And this is the basic dialogue that is exchanged between Ayan Ranjan and Anshu Naharia while in the investigation. So Anshu clearly says, he says that why did you hit the girls? So he said औकात में नहीं रखेंगे तो लोग काम नहीं कर सकते. The fact being that the function of these Dalit is to stay within the limits, and the limits are specified by the high caste individuals. Anshu obviously being one of the high caste people. And Ayan specifically asks that what is their limit and how. So he simply says that whatever he is offering as a compensation for their work is the ultimate limit of each Dalit. Also, then there is slight intonation towards power dynamics, how every politician in the times of elections professes of being uh, someone who believes in equality, and then he goes to various he goes to houses of Dalits and eats food with them. Obviously it again resonates with the fact that that he believes in the caste system, and he's so entrenched in the caste system that he brings along his own food when he's dining with Dalit. So these are the few instances that can be witnessed in the movie Article 15, and this is perhaps about all about Article 15. Talking about Akrosh now, uh, a little uh, briefing with the storyline of the movie is that in the movie Akrosh, obviously there is this village Jhanjhar in which lived like obviously there's very strict caste dynamics that are that are being followed, and the movie is basically based on honor killings. However, what happens is in this particular village there's a high caste girl by the name of Roshni, whose parents obviously come from very affluent as well as powerful backgrounds apart from being very high caste. And a Dalit boy falls in love with her. He goes and they are in love for a considerable period of time. He goes to the city, becomes is doing his MBBS, and but at the same, and then he thinks maybe that he's now that he's successful enough, he can come and marry Roshni. But then Roshni is being forced to marry a man of an upper caste background, and then he tries to elope Roshni with his friends, elope with Roshni with his friends, which ultimately results in the death of the boy named Dinu, and obviously his friends as well, who also come from very high caste backgrounds. Now, the movie Akrosh basically insinuates at the fact that what happens with people who try to outstep their caste determined boundaries. So Dino is a boy who comes from a Dalit background, but he strives to earn a good name and a good income in the city. However, no matter how high he rides on the financial ladder or how high he climbs on the social level, how many people he knows, it is insignificant in when the matter of caste comes. So the first thing that the movie talks about is that there is no value of Dalit life. The fact that Dinu himself has gone to the
Uh, Alisha, you have to conclude.
yeah sure
Start.
yeah sure. So the fact that the boy himself has escaped the village setting, but that his family is still being condemned, and they're leading an extremely they're leading an extremely sad life where the entire localities are being burned down, is heartbreaking. the fact that his brother-in-law is hung when he's alive in front of his wife is another one instance of brutality. Okay, so talking about one important fact that in both the situation, one thing that we can see is that the people who come to the rescue of these Dalits and who can see the caste system for what it is come from non-village backgrounds. They come from rural backgrounds. Both in the investigating officer Ayan Ranjan in Article 15 and the investigating officer Siddhanta Chaturvedi from in who's a CBI officer in the movie Akrosh. He both of them come from urban backgrounds, and that they can see the caste system for what it is, and it's only then that they can condemn it. While other police officers in both the movies who are from the basic village setup, they not just advocate caste system, but they also commit crimes in the name of it, and then are keen on erasing the evidence, etc. Now, the fact being that both of the movies are, though they say that they are fictional storylines, they're heavily inspired. Akrosh being a movie that is heavily inspired from cases, but from multiple cases, so the instances have been taken from a number of cases. Apart from that, Article 15 is completely based on Badao rape case allegations that obviously took place in Badao in the year 2014. So the fact being that both these movies are reminiscent of very true realities, and this is what happened in the cases, and the movies are drawn very, very close to the actual investigation. The fact of that about this is heartbreaking. The movies made very, very good money on the box office, though there's no more time for reading the comments. There are very positive comments from the audience. However, both the movies faced opposition from upper caste groups, and they said that they were showing the upper caste in bad lights and similar things. So this is what my paper basically talks about: the reception of these movies based on Dalit issues. They're mainstream movies. They're making good money. Obviously, not enough money as much as any romantic comedy, etc., would have made, but they bring forward a very important fact of Dalit existence. Uh, so yeah, thank you. This is pretty much what I wanted to say about my paper, and yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Alisha. And so we will promptly go to our next presentation of the paper, and the next person who's presenting is Sreya Chatterjee. Sreya Chatterjee is a postgraduate student of English literature from Jadavpur University, Kolkata. Her research interests include post-colonial literature, gender studies, and popular culture. Her article on feminist Bollywood horror is publication cellular journal of Miranda House, University of Delhi. She also writes fiction in her spare time, and her poetry has recently been published in Setu, the magazine, and Livewire. So over to you, Shreya. You would be given 20 minutes, and yeah, you have to switch on your mic.
Yeah, hello, good evening to everybody. My presentation is visible, right?
No, no, we can only see you, but not what you are showing on screen.
Now is it visible?
Not yet.
Okay. So it's kind of vanishing. I don't know why.
You can try the present now and then share your entire screen if you're all right with it.
Yeah, I could do that. Yeah. Okay, so
If only
I
the
clicked.
slides are having a problem, you can share the entire screen.
Chrome wants to share the contents of your screen with okay, but it just shows. Yeah. Okay. Now is it visible?
Yes, it's coming.
It's coming. Okay. Thank you. Good evening to everybody. It's lovely to be here. I would like to start my paper, Beasts of Burden, the Dehumanized Dalit Consciousness in Kastoori and Fandry, by quoting a fragment of B.R. Ambedkar's Mahat's speech in 1927, where he says, "The caste Hindus of Mahad are so reasonable that they not only draw water from the lake themselves, but freely permit people of any religion to draw water from it. Nor do the caste Hindus prevent members of species considered lower than the human, such as birds and beasts, from drinking at the lake. But they prevent the untouchables from drinking the water of the Chavadar lake, for they do not wish to acknowledge, by such a permission, that castes declared inferior by sacred tradition are in fact their equals. We are not going to the Chavadar lake merely to drink its water. We are going to the lake to assert that we too are human beings like others." So, in tracing how cinema as a cultural product appears to dutifully genuflect to an Indian Brahminical order, Suraj Yangre sheds light on a yesteryear trend where the characters' caste identities were actually subsumed under other signifiers, for example, of the poor man, the orphan man, and so on, so that Dalitness is rarely overtly shown as one of the variables producing subalternity. This erasure has slowly, if yet inadequately, made way for foregrounding Dalit narratives in contemporary cinema. But in a Brahminical socio-cultural landscape, the Dalit characters are still connotated as being primitive, obtuse, inhumane, which essentially strips them of humanity. So, this paper will inspect the dehumanized Dalit consciousness and its relegation to the realm of the beastly in the movies Kastoori and Fandry, and analyze how the films critique this very representation. Gopal Guru avers in Experience, Caste, and the Everyday Social, the body does not signify only an individual. It already includes the social. The multiplicity that characterizes the social is already implicated within any body. In the movies, the child protagonists Gopi and Jabya are indoctrinated in a system where caste identity is an embodied reality, permeating to very tangible, physical aspects of oppression. While Jabya of Fandry comes from a family of menial laborers and pig hunters, Kasturi's Gopi helps his father in manual scavenging and post-mortem. So for both of them, sustenance is punctuated with actively seeking out and being in close proximity to waste and degeneration. Kasturi reflects the dismal living conditions of menial workers with unflinching transparency. The film begins with a jarring shot of the boy looking down at a toilet as the camera pans back to a pile of excreta. With utter nonchalance, he washes up the feces and then joins his mother, who is also a cleaner at the hospital. Such grotesque images follow even during his post-mortem work. Particularly gruesome scene has Gopi scavenging for parts of a corpse that has been exhumed by a dog as onlookers flinch at him in disgust. In another, Gopi has to pick up a severed finger from the railway tracks so that the body can be reassembled for examination. So what happens is that in time, Gopi's understanding of things like humanity or death comes to be inflected with indifference because he's so exposed to corporeality in its most grotesque form. Unlike vocations that facilitate socio-cultural transactions and human exchange, Dalits like Gopi dwell among the dirty and the dead. Similarly, as members of the Kaikadi community, Jabya's family is also systematically denied human interaction on equal terms. In a village where people have to take a bath, even if they just graze the infamous pig or fandry as they call it, Jabya and his clan are called upon to hunt it. They're the only people who voluntarily touch it and even consume its meat. So it is that their community is defined primarily in relation to this beast. Tolerated just so they can dispose of the pig, the Kachrumanis are virtually untouchables themselves. So over and over, these images affirm the notion that to be Dalit is to be surrounded by beasts, offensive odor, and squalor in a world that is barely habitable or even human. So when a hierarchy that marks the successively receding levels of humanity, when it posits the Dvija, the twice-born Brahmin, as an intermediary to the divine, then the Dalit, the Shudra, is identified as a subhuman among the lowest of the low. Ambedkar writes about this order of graded inequality as adumbrated in the Rig Veda, where the Brahman is made the Purusha's mouth, the Rajanya his arms, the Vaishya he was his thighs, and the Shudra sprang from his feet. So he explains, the Brahman is equated to the mouth of the creator. Mouth being the noblest part of the anatomy, the Brahmin becomes the noblest, the custodian of knowledge and learning. The feet form the lowest and the most ignoble part of the human frame. Accordingly, the Shudra is placed last in the social order and is given the filthiest function, namely to serve as a menial. Jyotirao Phule, another very popular Dalit theorist and activist, he often compares the plight of Shudras and Atishudras to the black slaves, and he says that they are often treated as beasts of burden. So then, if we question what is it to live a beastly life, then Phule expatiates, the beast knows nothing more than eating, sleeping, copulating, protecting its offspring, defending itself from enemies. The beasts cannot improve upon this, and therefore their original condition does not change even a little. To live like a human being, then, must be characterized by human will. Human life must be characterized by human will to change one's destiny, to shape it. But as Ambedkar says, division of labor brought about by the caste system is not a division based on choice. Individual sentiment, individual preference has no place in it. So similarly, when the Patil orders Jabya to pick up the pig from the drain, Fandry shows that it is not one's own occupation but familial affiliation that predetermines the Dalit's dehumanized status. As we see in the screen, Jabya is dressed in a school uniform, but that does not exempt him from already being confined to his caste identity. All other potential identities he might grow up into are foreclosed. And the films also show how the family plays a role in this. Gopi's mother says, oh, it doesn't matter how many prizes you get, you're still gonna have to sweep like your father. Or like Jabya's father says that you think you're a hero, you just pick up the stick and hit the pig. So scenes like these show that the Dalit consciousness remolds itself according to the images cast by a Brahminical society and cannot imagine a different existence for the next generation. The myth begets the reality, which in turn reinstates the myth, and so on and so forth. It perpetuates. Similarly, Gopi is denied all other self signifiers like intellect, qualifications, etc., to establish a self image. He is denied a personality itself because it is his body that belies its Dalit identity. Having to work long hours amidst corpses and human waste, Gopi becomes obsessed with the way his body perennially stinks of filth. Even though he attends school, he is segregated from his peers, who mostly recognize him as a foul smelling body than a fellow human. Guru and Sarukkai write, consider the sense of smell. We associate, detect, and define objects through their smell. India is not just a land of thousand mutinies or a million gods, it is also a land of a million smells. Against this backdrop, meaning making of the social occurs through its association with smells and other senses, and the scavenging social is defined by the smell of sewage and garbage. So, this also explains in turn why Gopi is so utterly fascinated by ittar or the perfume that he procures from his friend Adem's uncle's shop, because it can mask the truth of his Dalitness. Assigned the caste identity of a Bhangi, Gopi becomes akin to the very waste that he disposes. The Dalit himself is equated with filth, ubiquitous but abhorrent, existing only to be abdicated from civilized society. As Phule writes, the Shudras and Atishudras were regarded with supreme hatred and contempt. The commonest rights of humanity were denied them, even their shadow is deemed a pollution. They are considered as mere chattels. Like waste, they too are easily disposable because it is enjoined that if a Brahmin kill a frog or a dog or a lizard, an owl, a crow, or a Shudra, he is easily absolved of his sin by performing a penance. Then, in Kastoori, during a storytelling congregation, Gopi hears the story of Saint Gorakshanath, who is allowed communion with God only after laving himself with Kastoori, a special kind of deer mask. So then starts his search for this divine scent to erase the stench of the Dalit body. He becomes so convinced of the scent's transformative potential and enamored by the deer that he hallucinates about it and sticks cutouts of the deer on his board, which is very like the way Jabya spends his days lovingly tracing Shalu's name on the board. So the boys, they both nurture a secret, hoping that the collective mythology that surrounds the Dalit identity will be superseded by a personal mythology, that of an underdog winning over the girl he so desires in case of Jabya. So as Jabya roams the streets with friend Pirya, following Shalu's every move with mute adoration, his quest for the magical Black Sparrow's ashes to win over the upper caste dream girl is represented as a way of transcending the very bodily reality that is granted to him. For Gopi too, the scent of Kasturi metonymically signifies this very transcendence that he cannot afford. For his life is not regulated by will, not by individual will at any cost, but by the dogma of predestination, as Ambedkar writes in Annihilation of Caste. Considering the co-optation of knowledge by Brahmins, or pen-wielding butchers as Fuller refers to them, Kasturi and Fandry indicate that education is the most vital mode of effectuating transcendence. It offers the Dalit consciousness the privilege of self-signification. This is hinted at in many ways, but especially when in Kasturi a magician visits their school and says, you just smell the textbook in front of you and I'm going to magically recreate this scent that lingers in all of your hearts. So things like that. And coincidentally, the social worker who advises Dalit children like Gopi to get a proper education carries a stole with an emblem of the Kasturi deer, and Gopi stares at it, transfixed. So, this shows how separate strands of desire converge in Gopi's search for self definition. While the child continues to interpret his reality through a mythical framework, he is not oblivious to the socio political advantages afforded by getting an education. An object of desire is transposed onto another once again as Gopil stares longingly at a billboard advertising a fragrant soap. On it is a beautiful woman with the caption, Tulsi soap makes you fragrant and pure. Barbara Holridge writes, in the Dharma Shastras, the body is refigured in accordance with the Brahminical discourse of Dharma, and the purity body is ascribed a central role as the processual body that mediates transactions among the divine body, the cosmos body, and the social body. But the purity body is forever denied to children like Gopi due to his frequent contact with feces and urine, so bodily secretions that are classified as inherent impurities of the human body. Gopi's longing is for this purity, the purity of the self, firstly, as discussed, but also the purity of the other, as inscribed on the inaccessible body of the upper caste woman. So, what this shows is that he simultaneously navigates the embodied reality of a Dalit person and that of an adolescent discovering his emergent sexuality. Ambedkar writes, institutions are sustained by other sanctions besides law. Of these, religious sanction and social sanction are the most important. When even the Upanishads state that Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas are born in pleasant womb, and the Chandala is born in the stinking womb, prevalent religious myths only enforce Gopi's dehumanized status. The domain of religion also widens this chasm between Jabya's community and the rest of the villagers. During a festival, for example, where the entire populace breaks out into a frenzied dance, Jabya and others are allowed just a little amount of participation and then immediately they're reduced to mere props when they have to hold aloft the lamp used in the ceremony. So scenes like these show how the Dalit is rebuffed during social intercourse and how co-participation does not guarantee true solidarity or acceptance. Guru and Sarukkai write, the conception of belonging is not an abstract experience but a concrete one. One can experience this sense of belonging through the feeling of corporeal touch, which plays a crucial role in deciding the contours of the social. That is why the theme of touch pervades so many of Jabya's dreams. For example, in a nightmare, he sees himself drowning in a well as people all around him shout, the biggest touched her, the biggest touched her. And Jabya tries to float upwards, but then he just keeps sinking deeper and deeper into the darkness. Now, extrapolating the girl in this nightmare to be Shalu, Jabya's anxiety is born from the hysteria that surrounds exogamous unions. In a society framing caste within gender differences, the value of the surplus Dalit man is always outweighed by that of the surplus Savarna woman. Having already, perhaps unknowingly, relegated himself to the status of the beast, Jabya fears his own contaminating touch. So it is that even in this fantasy, he walks beside Shalu at a distance, and only when he throws the Black Sparrow's magical ashes at her, he allows himself her embrace. Or perhaps he wishes that she will allow him such proximity after a purificatory rite. Then finally, both the narratives are also characterized by a sudden disjuncture in the protagonists' lives, a painful severance from their personal mythologies. So far, the narratives encourage viewers to interpret momentary setbacks as mere obstacles in a teleology that might just guarantee a happy resolution. Gopi, for example, what he just has to do is amass the full 3,000 rupees and then he can get hold of the Kastoori. But obviously, we have to acknowledge the fact that time and again it seems quite bleak because it doesn't seem he'd ever get hold of the money. But by hook or by crook, he does it. And the film also subtly indicates that this is a system that breeds crime when the very innocent Gopi resorts to crookery and steals jewelry to pay off his dues. But then he finally does it. He gets hold of the money and he pays the dues. But then Kasturi's ending brilliantly dispels the neoliberal myth that failure only corresponds to a lack of merit. Subverting normative representational tropes, it shows a Dalit boy topping his district in Sanskrit, the language of the priestly class, and yet it does not matter. It does not transform into something substantial in the end, because individual eminence does not necessarily override structural inequalities. So he has to work in the hospital in lieu of his drunkard father, and he cannot even go to the dais on the day of the prize distribution. As Adim later describes the pomp of the ceremony and an audience in ruptures, Gopi spends yet another day amidst corpses, wiping out blood, and then violently throws up in sheer disgust. Kasturi ends with the same brand of defiance as it began. When Adam tries to console his friend with the new perfume, Gopi holds the bottle for a second before hurling it into the open sewer. The camera hovers over the floating water and shows how the perfume kind of slowly flows out into the gutter. So, what this does is that it obliquely acts as a rejection of the very doctrine that conferred a subhuman status on people like Gopi. With the rejection of the perfume, he also dismisses the need to compensate for his stench. So Kasturi dismisses the pleasant smelling markers of civility. It refuses to play act in the human domain, so far categorically denied to Dalits. It contends with its viewers and toys with their expectations by upending the credo that a film ought to aestheticize the real. As Limbali argues, how can the aestheticism and discussions of beauty be reconciled with the Dalit consciousness? The revolutionary consciousness is based on ideas of equality, liberty, justice, and solidarity rather than pleasure. So, extending that to contemporary Dalit cinema, that too calls for a paradigm shift in the imaginary of beauty. Similarly, Fandry tantalizes its viewers by hinting at a possible reciprocation by Shalu. It always keeps us guessing, and time and again, sometimes it seems Shalu might just be aware of his existence because she smiles at him during a fair. And also the presence of the mentor come confidant Chankya, which says that a union against great odds might just be possible. But Fandry too denies viewers a world where film logic mandates that the quasi-fulfilled romance of the mentor finds fruition via the protege's story. Although the climactic scene shows the elusive Black Sparrow at a stone's throw from Jabia, he is interrupted by his enraged father and dragged back to the Fandry hunting ground. Fandry hammers in the message that nothing, not even magic, can level the playing field for these two because they inhabit vastly different worlds characterized by drastically different ethoses. And because it is impossible.
You have
Sorry.
to conclude.
Yeah, I'm done.
You
I'm
have to-
done. Since it is impossible to read Dalit literature and cinema's commitment to revolt and rejection within the framework of traditional aesthetics, Fandry takes away Jabia's protagonist status and he's shown to be a circus freak played for laughs. And then when he tries to escape humiliation from his peers by hiding, people quickly pick up on his similarity with the pig that hides in the trenches and bushes. And as jeers and taunts of, "Hey, Fandry," follow him, Jabia realizes that Shalu has never really looked at him but seen through him because he's a less than human non-presence. But at the very moment that he's identified with the beast most explicitly, he fights back and throws stones at his attackers till they're forced to retreat. So he aims the final stone at the camera, and as it hits the lens, in a moment mimicking a violent fourth wall break, the audience is instantly held culpable. With the rupture of the fictional narrative, there is a complete blurring of the cinematic realism and the real that is just outside the frame, as Manju Edichira writes. We cannot refuse complicity, for at that moment we are forced to re-evaluate our location in the matrix of shared hypocrisies, as Mina Dhanda coins the term. We are forced to acknowledge our collective Savarna hypocrisy, and therein lies the success of these films, therein lies the self-affirmation of the Dalit consciousness. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Sreya. That was very good and very interesting. So we would like to take questions now, but just from my end, I would not try to summarize for the people because it would, they are about very different things and different films and different methods even. But broadly, I have well, some are questions, but you don't have to answer them. You can just take it in your stride. You can take it as a thing to think about. So about Ari and Alisha, I have to like, how would you posit, say, for example, the question of the male presence, and of course the masculine presence, and how it fares in when you're trying to see caste and its relationship with cinema. Generally, we find that it is being fought through uh, presence of a masculine figure and through a masculine identity. So, how would you, like, try to negotiate or relate to that? Mm, But about Sanjay and Shreya, see, Sanjay, you have used the both of you have used the term signifier, and Sanjay, you have taken uh, works from, or taken your inspiration from Bath, and so the problem is that when you're saying signifier in terms of cinema, or you're talking about film semiotics, for example, you're inspired or you're influenced by Action Max and Bath and Andre Bazin. Now the problem is that both Roland Barthes and Bazin talks about film semiotics or films or signifiers in a different manner, because for them, for Barthes, if you look at Camera Lucida, the book, specifically, and as well as Andre Bazin, the ontology of photographic image from What is Cinema, Volume 1. For both of them, photography is framed in time, is embalming in time, whereas cinema is that photographic image plus time, so it moves through time. So signifier becomes a different usage altogether. So you know what would your understanding or thinking of the term be? But you can consider this for your later works as well, but just something to think about. Also the works of, say, Krakow, um, and Shreya, you have used this term, although not very much, but Dalitness. So I mean, you can of course use it in some context, I guess, but then what happens with the terms like this is that it runs the problem of being sounding essentialist, like it would mean one thing for a politically charged manifesto or a argument to say this, but it would mean a different thing if it is used in a regular academic discourse. If you're talking about blackness, or if you're talking about otherness, it would be one thing to project it like as part of a political argument, but as an academic discourse, it runs the risk of becoming essentialist a bit. Like there is some deep hidden essence that results in the ness or the ism. But I'm sure you would uh, develop more into this in your later works. But yeah, you can answer to this, or we can take questions from the audience here. um,
Uh, Hi, sir. Alisha this side. So, talking about the male presence, what basically I could process in the while I was writing my work was basically that when it comes to Dalit issues, what it takes to solve them is basically, in most of the cases in the movies that I talk about, is a male high caste individual who comes from an urban background, who comes and sees things,
yeah.
and he just appears as the ultimate messiah, and then he's a male, of course, and then he solves the things. So it just in a way tries to just reinstate the entire theory of the caste system, where a high caste individual who is specifically a male comes to the rescue of the downtrodden and Dalits at large.
Yeah. Um, yeah, you were going to say
Uh,
something?
yeah, regarding the male presence, I think both Paranjit and Mari Selvaraj, though they are able to get the caste politics right, they are still unable to get the gender politics right. Because more in not only in these movies, even Mari Selvaraj's previous movie, Pariyarum Perumal, which
Yes,
gets everything right, makes the heroine caste blind and also shows her as one of the potential agents who would be able to produce a casteless society. So I don't think they get that right. But again, these women characters, though they do not carry the plot on them, but at least they are bolder when compared to the cliched heroines that we have seen. But I think Dalit male directors are new for Tamil
yeah,
cinema. So I think it would be on
but
Dalit
yeah, as
women
yet it is the general
directors.
trend.
Yeah. So I think it's on Dalit women directors to show the female experience, the woman
Exactly,
experience. So I think that's one criticism that we can all acknowledge.
exactly. Very good. Thank you. Yeah, Sanjay, were you going to say something?
So, I mean, what I wanted to say is like about signifier in the film, both the films, mainly Sarpatta Parambarai, it's like 1970s. I mean, as you said, time actually like in cinema, the author as in like in Paranjit, he captures the 1970s, like entire aesthetics of the 1970s with Dravidian politics and to include those in the montages and later to acknowledge it in the way of Dalit Body narrative and in present, like to look into that way, I'm stating that it is like a more of a subjective narration of looking back at the past and also how 60s and 70s politics was like just emerging. Like as Madhav Prasad said, to like cine politics really delved into 1960s, 70s after MGR and everyone who in the South came into politics. Like after 1990s too, as MSS Pandy states, like how Dravidian politics has been like intruded with dominant caste narratives same in caste politics and also mainly in terms of electoral politics and how it is being changed. So in that question, the other film, Madras, 2014, that's the second film. So in that context, I'm looking into signifier as in like that's just a wall, but it has a hierarchical power in terms of capturing the time and capturing the entire quotient of regional politics, and also in the way in the older films how it is capturing the authentic narration as in terms of looking into Dravidian politics and also Periyar in the way how he is giving an acknowledgement as in how it is really important to look back at the 70s in the way how it is important in Dalit Bhajan narration in the entire spectrum of cinema. So in that
Yeah,
way, I'm using the cinephile terms.
but maybe if you take just the word and you do specific frames in a film, what happens is it is stuck to the notion of the mise en scene, and it is stuck to the conceptual framework of the what Andre Baza calls the plasticity of the image or plasticness of the image. But there is not just mise en scene in a film. There is also the cuts, the montage. So signifier in cinema becomes much more vibrant and dynamic if you look at in that way. But yeah, completely. Very good. And yes, and Shreya, do you have something to add to this?
Right, yeah, thank you so much for your comments. Well, I'm not really well versed with film theory, but from a layperson's perspective, it's very interesting that you mention how film is essentially a narrative and then plus time. Both these films, I felt that there's a sense of stasis that pervades both these films, as in, it is, like I said in my paper, how can we even call it a teleology? Nothing really changes much. It's almost a sense of cyclical time, as in, almost like Jabia reiterates the story of his father and Gopi reiterates the story of his father. So, in a way, there isn't a sense of real transformation happening. As in, sure, events are transpiring, but how much can we characterize those events transpiring as those marked with change? I mean, it felt pretty cyclical to me. So, I don't know if that makes sense. And also, as you spoke about how mentioning Dalitness often runs the risk of sounding essentialist, yes, I do agree it does. But then I also do contend that even though we should be aware of the multiplicitous experience of being a Dalit person. Our exposure to films do not actually give us a sense of what this multiplicity might be like. I mean, we are not exposed to the various cultural facets of a Dalit existence, or what are the other things than just being oppressed. Because the sad reality is that it would be pretty, I mean, it's just unfathomable to move from that side of portrayal. I mean, how can we portray the multiplicitousness of a Dalit person's existence when we are completely focusing on their oppression? Because the need of the moment is that we have to focus on the oppressive side of it, how they have been essentialized for so long as less than human, subhuman presences, and so on. So, I mean, I would, I mean, that's my take on it, at least, that the multiplicity
Yeah,
of it, we do not get to see it as much. I felt.
okay, I take it. Like you can look at Gopal Guru's argument, but in general, caste is experiential. My experience with caste in Bengal is much different from
Right,
there
right.
when I was in Delhi. In Delhi, it was right in my face. People would ask my caste
Mm.
if I went to take a room for rent or whatever. But here it would be masked with a Bengali Bhadralok image of
Right.
like
Yes.
pedagogy. No, we are not culturally similar and all of this rubbish. So there is no direct confrontation of the thing. But yeah, about the cinematic time, it's actually something very good that you say it's cyclical. See, because this, if you want to explore this aspect, then I would say you can look towards films from Southeast Asia, especially films by Apichatpong or Love Diaz, and several other this thing called slow cinema. So what happens is that for people who have been denied any kind of space, what South Asian or Indian South Asian people call subaltern. I'm not using that term. For people who have been denied space of talking or expressing or showing any kind of resistance for a very long time, for them, time goes slower. The cinematic time and the real time cannot match together. So films by Apichat Pong, films by Love Diaz, uh, they are very slow. They are called slow cinema for a reason, because they're very slow, and that is how most minorities of most places go through. Their time is slow, so the cinematic time has to be circular, you know cyclical or slow. So it's a very good thing that you pointed out, and you can look into further. But yes, any questions from the previous side, or we can end it here as of now. So okay, um, Ritika, uh, Ritika Roy Chaudhary, right? You are the one who,
Yes, sir. Yes.
yeah. So
Uh,
you can,
I don't see any question for this session.
okay.
Uh,
So we can
so,
conclude then.
yes, we can conclude.
So thank you everyone for attending this session, and mostly thank you the people who presented their papers. Again, I would say that Caste and Cinema try to engage, cinema and Caste is a very pioneer work. Thank you, everyone. So, yeah, what do you think?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
So we end it here.
So much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, sir.